Chap- Chapter 64, verse 6. We have all become like one who is unclean, and all our righteous deeds are like a polluted garment. We all fade like a leaf, and our iniquities, like the wind, take us away. That was Isaiah. And then we can also look at Genesis chapter 15, verse 6. Therefore, the only righteousness by which sinners may be justified is the perfect righteousness of God that is imputed to those who believe. And he believed the Lord, and he counted it to him as righteousness. Genesis chapter 15, verse 6. And we can look at Romans chapter 4, verse 5. And to the one who does not work, but believes in him who justifies the ungodly, his faith is counted as righteousness. And now moving on to Matthew chapter 5, verse 21 through 22. You have heard that it was said but to those of old, you shall not murder, and whoever murders will be liable to judgment. But I say to you that everyone who is angry with his brother will be liable to judgment. Whoever insults his brother will be liable to the council, and whoever says, "You fool," will be liable to the hell of fire. So let's take a look at the words "you have heard" and the words "but I say to you." Okay. You have heard that it was said, "You shall not commit adultery." That's Matthew chapter 5, verse 27. It was also said, "Whoever divorces his wife, let him give her a certificate of divorce." Matthew chapter 5, verse 31. Again, you have heard that it was said to those of old, "You shall not swear falsely, but shall perform to the Lord what you have sworn." Matthew chapter 5, verse 33. You have heard that it was said, "An eye for an eye, and a tooth for a tooth." Matthew chapter 5, verse 38. You have heard that it was said, "You shall love your neighbor and hate your enemy." Matthew chapter 5, verse 43. You shall not murder. Well, here we go to Deuteronomy chapter 5, verse 17. Jesus was not altering the terms of the law in any of these passages. Rather, he was correcting what they had heard, the rabbinical understanding of the law. Okay, now on to Matthew chapter 5, verse 22. But I say to you that everyone who is angry with his brother will be liable to judgment. Whoever insults his brother will be liable to the council, and whoever says, "You fool," will be liable to the hell of fire. So let's take a look at the words, "you fool." Empty-handed. Jesus suggested here that the verbal abuse stems from the same sinful motives, angry and hatred, that ultimately lead to murder. The internal attitude is what the law actually prohibits, and therefore an abusive insult carries the same kind of moral guilt as an act of murder. What about hell? A reference to the Hinnom Valley, southwest of Jerusalem. This valley permitted human sacrifices there during their reigns. Let's take a look at 2 Chronicles 28, verse 3. And he made offerings in the valley of the son of Hinnom. and buried his sons as an offering, according to the abominations of the nations, whom the Lord drove out before the people of Israel. And he burned his sons as an offering in the valley of the son of Hinnom, and used fortune-telling, and omens, and sorcery, and dealt with mediums. He did much evil in the sight of the Lord, provoking him to anger. And let's take a look at 2 Chronicles chapter 28, verse 3, and chapter 33, verse 6. And therefore it was called the Valley of Slaughter. Therefore, behold, days are coming, declares the Lord, when this place shall no more be called Topheth, or the valley of the son of Hinnom, but the valley of slaughter. Jeremiah chapter 19, verse 6. In Jesus' day, it was a garbage dump where fires burned continually, and was thus an apt symbol of eternal fire. Come to terms quickly with your accuser while you are going with him to court, lest your accuser hand you over to the judge, and the judge to the guard, and you be put in prison. That's Matthew 5, verse 25. Come to terms quickly. Jesus calls for reconciliation to be sought eagerly, aggressively, and quickly, even if it involves self-sacrifice. It's better to be wronged than to allow a dispute between brethren to be a cause for dishonoring Christ. So, looking at 1 Corinthians chapter 6, verse 7, to have lawsuits at all with one another is already a defeat for you. Why not rather suffer wrong? Why not rather be defrauded? Now, let's take a look at the word accuser. This speaks of one's adversary in a law case. In prison, let's look at prison. Debtor's prison, where the person could work to earn back what he had defrauded. You've heard that it was said, you shall not commit adultery. Matthew chapter 5, verse 27. And Matthew chapter 5, verse 29. If your right eye causes you to sin, tear it out and throw it away. For it's better that you lose one of your members than that your whole body be thrown into hell. Tear it out and throw it away? Jesus was not advocating self-mutilation, for this would not, in fact, cure lust, which is actually a problem of the heart. He was using this graphic to demonstrate the seriousness of sins, of lust, and evil desire. The point is that it would be better to lose a member of one's own body than to bear the eternal consequences of the guilt from such a sin. Sin must be dealt with drastically because of its deadly effects. Let's take a look at Matthew chapter 5, verse 31. It was also said, whoever divorces his wife, let him give her a certificate of divorce. Matthew chapter 5, verse 31. It was also said. The rabbis had taken liberty with that, what Scripture actually said. They referred to Deuteronomy chapter 24, verses 1 through 4, as if it were given merely to regulate the paperwork when one sought divorce. So let's take a look at Deuteronomy chapter 24, verses 1 through 4. When a man takes a wife and marries her, if then she finds no favor in his eyes because he has found some indecency in her, and he writes her a certificate of divorce and puts it in her hand and sends her out of his house, and she departs out of his house. And if she goes and becomes another man's wife, and the latter man hates her and writes her a certificate of divorce and puts it in her hand and sends her out of his house, or if the latter man dies, who took her to be his wife, then her former husband, who sent her away, may not take her again to be his wife after she has been defiled, for that is an abomination before the Lord. And you shall not bring sin upon the land that the Lord your God is giving you for an inheritance. Deuteronomy chapter 24, verses 1 through 4. Thus, they have wrongly concluded that men could divorce their wives for anything that displeased them, as long as they gave a certificate of divorce. But Moses provided this as a concession to protect the woman who was divorced, not to justify or legalize divorce under all circumstances. Matthew chapter 5, verse 32. But I say to you that everyone who divorces his wife, except on the ground of sexual immorality, makes her commit adultery, and whoever marries a divorced woman commits adultery. So let's take a look at except sexual immorality. Divorce was allowed in cases of adultery. Okay. Looking at Luke chapter 16, verse 18 must be understood in the light of this verse. Makes her commit adultery. The assumption is that divorced people will remarry. If the divorce was not for sexual immorality, any remarriage is adultery, because God does not acknowledge the divorce. Now let's look at Matthew chapter 5, verse 33. Again, you have heard that it was said to those of old, you shall not swear falsely, but shall perform to the Lord what you have sworn. So this verse says, you shall not swear falsely. This expresses teaching from Leviticus chapter 19, verse 12, Numbers chapter 30, verse 2, and also, you shall not swear by my name falsely, and so profane the name of your God. I am the Lord. That's Leviticus chapter 19, verse 12. If a man vows a vow to the Lord, or swears an oath to bind himself by a pledge, he shall not break his word. He shall do according to all that proceeds out of his mouth. Numbers chapter 30, verse 2. And now here's Deuteronomy chapter 23, verse 21. If you make a vow to the Lord your God, you shall not delay fulfilling it, for the Lord your God will surely require it of you, and you will be guilty of sin. You shall be careful to do what has passed your lips, for you have voluntarily vowed to the Lord your God what you have promised with your mouth. Deuteronomy chapter 23, verse 21. But I say to you, do not take an oath at all, either by heaven or it is the throne of God. Do not take an oath at all. But above all, my brothers, do not swear, either by heaven or by earth or by any other oath, but let your yes be yes and your no be no, so that you may not fall under condemnation. That's James chapter 5, verse 12. This should not be taken as a universal condemnation of oaths in all circumstances, for God himself confirmed a promise with an oath. Hebrews chapter 6, verse 13 through 18, and Acts chapter 2, verse 30. Let's take a look at Hebrews 6, 13 through 18. For when God made a promise to Abraham, since he had no one greater by whom to swear, he swore by himself, saying, Surely I will bless you and multiply you. And thus Abraham, having patiently waited, obtained the promise. For people swear by something greater than themselves, and in all their disputes an oath is final for confirmation.